रवा टाइम्स के एक और एपिसोड के साथ हम हाजिर हैं। अभी कुछ ही देर में हम शुरू करते हैं। अभी आमतौर पे ये होता है कि शुरू में आहिस्ता आहिस्ता 1 मिनट के अंदर अंदर काफ़ी लोग जमा हो जाते हैं। तो अभी हम शुरू करते हैं अपना प्रोग्राम ऑफिशियली। तो सबको बहुत बहुत सलाम रवा टाइम्स की टीम से। आपको अपना तारुफ करा दूं, मेरा नाम डॉक्टर काशिफ है। मैं बॉस्टन में रहता हूँ, यूनाइटेड स्टेट्स में, और मैं लिखता भी हूँ पाकिस्तान की सूरत हाल के बारे में और ह्यूमन राइट्स के बारे में और इस्लाम के बारे में लिखता हूँ। और रवा टाइम्स जो है ये आपको बताते चलें अनऑफिशियल चैनल है। ये किसी कम्युनिटी या ऑर्गेनाइजेशन के व्यूज़ को रिप्रेजेंट नहीं करता। और हम आमतौर पे ये करते हैं कि हर हफ्ता कोशिश करते हैं एक प्रोग्राम करें जिसमें हम किसी गेस्ट को बुलाएं और जो रेलेवेंट इश्यूज़ हैं पाकिस्तान के मतलब या इस्लाम के मतलब या ह्यूमन राइट्स के मतलब उन पे हम गुफ्तगू करें। तो इसी सिलसिले में आज जो है हमने एक ख़ास मेहमान को बुलाया है, और ये जो ख़ास मेहमान हैं इनका नाम है डॉक्टर क्रेग कॉन्सिडिन। और डॉक्टर क्रेग जो हैं ये सोशियोलॉजी पढ़ाते हैं राइस यूनिवर्सिटी में। बहुत माने हुए इंटरफेथ एक्टिविस्ट हैं। मुसलमानों और ईसाइयों के बीच जो रिलेशंस हैं उनके बारे में बात करते रहते हैं। फेसबुक पे बहुत मशहूर है, इंस्टाग्राम जो है इनका वो तो काफ़ी ज़्यादा मशहूर है। ट्विटर पे भी पाए जाते हैं। अभी हम इनका जो ट्विटर हैंडल्स हैं वो भी आपके नीचे शेयर कर देंगे इनसे बात करते हुए। और इसके अलावा जो ह्यूमन राइट्स है उसके बारे में भी बहुत बातचीत करते रहते हैं। कुछ लोग जो रवा टाइम्स में को बाकायदगी से फॉलो करते हैं, उन्होंने जो डॉक्टर क्रेग कॉन्सिडिन हैं उनका इंटरव्यू देखा होगा रवा टाइम्स से, जब ये जलसा सालाना यूएसए में आए थे। और इन्होंने वहाँ एक स्पीच भी की थी तकरीबन 5 मिनट की, जो आपको हम नीचे लिंक में भी शेयर कर देंगे। वो बहुत क्या कहते हैं, बहुत स्ट्रॉन्ग स्पीच थी ह्यूमन राइट्स के बारे में, इस्लाम के बारे में और हज़रत सल्लल्लाहु अलैहि वसल्लम के कैरेक्टर के बारे में। तो मैं आपको इनसे बगैर किसी डिले के इनसे बात करते हैं। हम इनसे कुछ सवालात पूछेंगे, आधा घंटा इनसे बात करेंगे और फिर इंशाअल्लाह बाकी जो सवालात हैं आपके उनके जवाब देंगे। डॉक्टर क्रेग कॉन्सिडाइन, अस्सलाम वालेकुम।
Alaikum salam, Kashif. How are you?
I'm very good. I'm very good. Thank you so much for agreeing to be part of this discussion on such a short notice. We appreciate you being here. I was just introducing you to our Urdu audience. We have about more than 30,000 subscribers on Rabwah Times, and through Facebook and YouTube, this goes out to a lot more people as well. And many of the people who are subscribed to our channel are in Pakistan and India. They speak Urdu as their primary language. So I'll be translating part of what you say at the end of the program in Urdu as well for their benefit. So I was just telling them about your work in interfaith circles, about your work for human rights. I was telling them about your sociology work at Rice University, and about how you're such a popular social media figure on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. So first of all, without further ado, thank you so much. And I'll start with your interview that you gave to Rabwah Times at Jalsa Salana, USA. How was your experience at that Jalsa?
It was incredible. It was uplifting. It was inspiring. And for me, it was a form of a spiritual retreat as well. It's a gathering that focuses on humanity, and it was uplifting, and it was also quite impressive. You had a rich ethnic diversity, racial diversity, and cultural diversity, all under the umbrella of Ahmadi Islam. So it was beautiful, really. It was a snapshot in a way of the human experience. We're all from different walks of life. There were non-Muslims there, white, black, but everyone came together and seemed to be on the same page. And there was a type of understanding of unity, of a emphasis on knowledge, the jihad of the pen. And as I was talking in my own speech about pluralism, like this idea that pluralism is different from tolerance. So tolerance is something that, when you tolerate someone, it's like tolerating a unruly child. Like you have to just tolerate that because that's your child. But the Jalsa was a representation of pluralism. So it was engaging in an energetic way with the human experience. So I absolutely loved it. Love for all, hatred for none. I think that perfectly the Jalsa.
That's right. Thanks, Craig. All of us who follow you on social media, we know that you're one of the most vocal critics out there of the rising Islamophobia, in the West, especially since we live in the United States. Relevant to what's happening in the political circles in America, you've been very vocal against the rise in Islamophobia. Now, you could have chosen an easy life and just said, you know what, it doesn't bother me. It's not about me. Why do I care? I'm the majority in the United States. What made you tread this path, and what makes you speak so much about the rising Islamophobia in the U.S.?
That's a good question. I think I can break it up into two parts. I think one is actually about me and my own experience with actually 9/11. I'll share that after. But I think the number one issue is we're facing a crisis of humanity, really. The global human population seems more divided and more antagonistic towards certain groups than ever before. I think, sadly, this idea of the clash of civilizations that was produced by scholars Bernard Lewis and Samuel Huntington, while I don't agree with any of what they're saying, this idea that different cultural groups and different faith groups cannot coexist, I don't agree with that, obviously, but I think that their theory is almost coming to fruition. And this is an issue where the very survival of humanity is on the line. Eboo Patel, he's a Muslim American. He wrote an excellent book called Acts of Faith, and he said the 21st century is going to be a century where the main conflict is the faith line. So it's going to be a challenge for the human race to figure out how to come together and sort out its problems. And we see that religion seems to be an issue. So, I look at these issues. A lot of people ask me, am I Muslim and why do I do it? And I usually respond by saying, I'm not just simply defending Islam. I'm actually, the way I see it, I'm defending humanity. Defending Islam is a way for me to defend humanity, the common experience, the human race. So in that light, I just feel spiritually enriched by trying to help people, by trying to restore dignity. There's a great Jewish saying called Tikkun Olam, which is to heal a fractured world. And I think if each and every one of us as individuals cares a bit more for the other and has a bit more compassion, I think we can start chipping away at some of the challenges that we're facing. I'm a human being. I'm a humanist before I'm a Catholic. I tell people that. My religion is humanity and my sect is Catholicism. Right. So I think big picture, there's that. And then personally, my own experience with 9/11, when that happened, if I was a student in Needham, which is not too far from Boston.
Right.
I was 15, and I kind of fell into the trap of Islamophobic rhetoric. I didn't know any Muslims. There were no Muslims in my town, and I went to college to become a CIA agent. I wanted to track down the bad guys, and I started studying. I started studying, and I started seeing the light, and I continued on that path of knowledge and learning and compassion and putting myself in other people's shoes. So I think I've continued on that path because I can't go back to the darkness. You can't retreat back into that kind of morphed world where you're not thinking straight about some of the world's issues. So I think to answer your question, there's the humanitarian thing and the personal thing.
Right. That's a great answer, Craig. How good it would be if everyone thought the same way. What we usually find is that people box themselves into certain labels, and they only speak about people within that box, within that label. And when it affects people outside that box, no one cares to speak about them. We see this all the time regarding people who are persecuted for whatever reason in whatever part of the world. If you're not part of that group, rarely do you speak up. And sadly, when people outside the box speak up, other people outside the box label them as people within the box, like you're called a Muslim. At times, and I've seen other people as well who speak against Islamophobia, and then everyone keeps asking them, "Are you a Muslim?" As if you shouldn't care if you're not one. So that's a great answer. I mean, our humanity is what kind of is the bigger box. That is the real box. That is what we should be caring about.
It is, and I think we've lost sight of that. And I think part of it's due to I think part of it's due to our media-driven world and this idea that news only works best when it circulates in catchy sound bites. And through that, you need these categories. Even like you throw a term out like Muslim or Christian.
Right.
All of that diversity within these religious communities just gets erased. And that all Muslims are the same or all Catholics are the same and so on. But I think we need to get back to finding ways in which we can relate to each other on a human level. Because at the end of the day, I think perhaps this is a very utopian idea, but I think at the end of the day, human beings across the board, regardless of their race, ethnicity, religion, and so on and so forth, they want the same things. They want to be respected. They want their voices to be heard. They want to be, and they want to be.
Exactly. So, Craig, just reminding you, we're going live on Facebook and YouTube. I'm having some live comments. I'm going to read a few of them right now. Navneet is, Tariq Malik is saying salam to you. Wahid Abdullah, mashallah. Hi, Craig. Peace and blessings upon you. I look forward to seeing you at our Jalsa here in the UK next year. That's from Muhammad Bilal. Muzammal Ahmed is saying respect for Dr. Craig. Sania Zafar is agreeing with what you said. Agreed, Dr. Craig. And then we have Hassan Farouk who says, love you, brother Craig. You're a champion of humanity. And other people are also just joining in. So we have a lot of comments, and I'll keep reading those comments. And if you have any questions for Dr. Craig, just ask us those questions in the comments, and I'll put them to him at the end of the show or during the show if it's relevant. All right, so Craig, going to our next question. I know you face this a lot as well, and I've encountered this as well. We talk about racism and Islamophobia in the same sentence, and as soon as you do that, there's a lot of people out there, and I especially find this coming from the new atheist community or the extreme far right. As soon as you mention racism with Islamophobia, everyone goes, but Islam is not a race. So Islamophobia cannot be a form of racism. And I read your recent article, which is excellent on this topic. And I think that's going to benefit a lot of people who are in the same situation, who encountered the same, same reactions from the far right and the new atheist community. Why do you believe Islamophobia is a form of racism?
Well, speaking on behalf of a sociological perspective, I think the best way to answer this is to go back into recent history and talk about some important sociologists. So Stuart Hall, who was actually from Britain, he was a Jamaican from Britain, he really pushed the boundary about how we think of the word race, and he traced it back through history. And he looked at it from the perspective of race being a social construct. So basically he's saying that race, this term race and the idea of race is actually just an imaginary term. And he uses scientific research to show that scientists have proven that this idea of races doesn't really exist, that human beings are actually a race. So race is not a biological reality. It's a social construct. And race, the term race, has meant something different in different periods of history as well. So when the European colonizers were going to the New World, the racism was being carried out on behalf of religious grounds, right? And then when you have the genetics movement with Hitler, it came down to the genetics and the biology, right? But thinking that, the Jews are not a race of people. They're not a race of people. The Asians are a race of people. The Africans are not a race. The whites, there's no such thing as race. So with that said, if we look at it as a social construct, we also can't dismiss this fact that racism still doesn't exist because people are still being discriminated against and othered based upon how they look. So Stuart Hall calls it a cultural racism. So the new form of racism is not saying, I don't like this person because they're black or because they're Jewish. It's through cultural symbols. So the hijab, for instance, or something like Sharia, or looking at media representations of a small village in Pakistan and saying, we're better than them. We are superior and they are inferior. And we see this playing out in U.S. foreign policy. When the United States invaded Iraq, George Bush was literally giving speeches saying, we have a superior form of government. We have democracy. We stand for women's rights. We stand for citizenship rights. And what he did is he blatantly othered an entire region of people in the Middle East, and it's happening all over the world. So we still see racism, even though race doesn't exist, and we see it playing out with Muslims, and largely through the body. You know, the body is a huge part of racism, and the media has created a stereotype of what a Muslim is and what a Muslim isn't.
That's right. That's right.
Like a beard, or a brown skin, or a hijab. So people are still looking at and their bodies, and they're saying, they're coming up with rash conclusions,
right?
And then they're acting on those conclusions. So the body is still being used. I mean, look at racial profiling at airports.
Right.
I mean, that is a classic example. If you have a certain name or if you look a certain way, you're more likely to get pulled over to the side and searched. And it's all because of this stereotype that a Muslim is, right? And
that's right.
It's so real, Kashif. It's so real, Islamophobia as racism, that even non-Muslims who look Muslim.
That's right. That's right.
So we had Inderjeet Sikh Mupper a few years ago. He was the Sikh man who was brutally beaten, pulled out of his car at a traffic stop and brutally beaten. We had an Arab Christian in Tulsa, not too far from here. He was literally murdered a few weeks ago on his own doorstep, all because they look a certain way and they fit the profile, right? So Islamophobia cannot be divorced from racism. It just doesn't work.
That's a very good explanation. And now that for example, you were at Jalsa USA as well, and you met American white converts to Islam, and I'm sure that a white Muslim, a white American Muslim convert, and a person like me who's originally from Pakistan and looks brown, the circumstances or the stereotyping we would face in society would be completely different, even though we are Muslim. So that's the underlying racism at play right there.
Absolutely.
And
we need to move beyond this idea that people who adopt a certain set of religious beliefs cannot be the racism. I mean, that's absolute nonsense. And they try to call it bigotry, and they try to call it discrimination.
Right.
At the end of the day, it's all linked to a visual representation and what that visual representation means to people.
Right. Exactly. That's true. So Mansoor Ali Khan is saying you're a wonderful person, and love from Afghanistan. There's someone saying I'm watching this from Australia, Perth, Australia, and salam to you. And then you have salam to both from Sultana Bhatti. Thanks from Rai Yaqub. Awesome from Salim Chatiman. Thank you guys for your comments. If you have any questions, you can ask those questions as well. From what? So I'm stereotyped all the time. Jazz Goodall. She says, I'm stereotyped all the time. I'm a white Australian and I don't look Muslim. So therefore, I'm considered not Muslim. That's a very good comment, Craig.
Right. So that's like kind of the reverse.
Exactly. Right.
Brown people can be Muslim. I mean, it's because we've been programmed.
Yeah.
Think a certain way. Just in previous generations.
Right.
In the States, for example, during slavery, people were programmed to think that if you're black, you're mentally inferior. I mean, that's absolute nonsense,
Yeah. Yeah, Jazz, thanks for that comment. That's actually very interesting. We really think about that, but that's reverse stereotyping there as well.
Mm.
So we're just going to change a gear now. We're almost halfway into the program. I want to talk about, since we're talking about human rights, we're talking about religion, religious bigotry, religious freedom. Just yesterday, there was a very sad incident that came out of Pakistan. There's a Christian colony that was attacked in Peshawar in Pakistan, in the north of Pakistan. We see that attacks on minority communities, especially Ahmadi Muslims, Christians, Shias, is actually not that uncommon. It's very sad. It's very unfortunate. It pains me a lot to see that Pakistan claims to be a Muslim country, and having read the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and his character with other faith groups, it really pains me a lot to see what's happening. And I've written a piece as well, which was widely circulated, about Islam's obligation to protect Christians, especially. And from your unbiased study of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him's life, and you've written extensively on this, I know, do you believe that those who seek to hurt Christians or other faith groups, for that matter, do you think they follow Islam, or do you think they defy its teachings?
They absolutely defy the teachings. My understanding of Prophet Muhammad's life and the Islamic Revolution, not only was this intended to not hurt Christians or other minority groups, but not to hurt anyone, not even a fly, not even a tree, right? So I like to step back, and I like to consider myself a lot of the times an Islamic essentialist. And by that, I mean, I think when the Islamic Revolution happened, there was an essence to it. And by essence, I mean like an overarching idea, an overarching principle. And I think some key words come up when I think about this movement, peace, harmony, coexistence, justice. Men and women are at one with nature. I mean, that's the big picture of Islam. That's what it was intended to do. And I think with the life of Prophet Muhammad, we have so many examples that prove that his intention was not to terrorize any human being. His objective was not to discriminate. His objective was to create a harmonious society, regardless of whether they were Muslim, Christian, or whatever. So these people who call themselves Muslim, they appear to have, as the Irish say, forgotten the plot. They have forgotten why Islam came about.
That's right.
During the time of Muhammad, it was a fractured society. There was tribal warfare. There was disagreements. And the reason why Muhammad was persecuted so much during his time, because he was representing the exact opposite,
That's right. And that's right.
To be fair, we have to also address an issue of like why these things in Peshawar and around the world are happening. And it's happening because people don't have knowledge of Islam, the essence of Islam. And they look at certain passages, not understanding that these passages were revealed to Prophet Muhammad during times of strife. So if the Quran is saying, lash out against this group or that group, he's not saying lash out at everyone who calls themselves Christian. I mean, he was himself in a specific situation, but that gets lost in the literal interpretation of things. So you have these imams and these mullahs who are literally taking passages word for word and saying, this is it. But they've lost the bigger picture. They've lost the essence, the humanity of Islam. Then, of course, Ashraf, as you know, and you raised this with some of the work that I've done, the covenants of the Prophet Muhammad with the Christian time. These set of documents, they could officially be recognized, I think, as treaties, state documents between two political bodies. And I argued that Prophet Muhammad was not simply tolerating Christian communities, he was engaging with them through pluralism. So he was telling us that even if a Christian church falls into disrepair, it's the obligation of Muslims to go and help the Christians repair their church. So he was
That's
saying
right.
this community gets complete religious freedom, and even with the jizya, right? So this is one of these hot topic terms. People even refer to me as a dhimmi, and they tell me how to live. And I say to them, if you look at these documents, Prophet Muhammad is very explicit. He said, ask them for money and we will defend them. They won't have to participate in some of the things of state. But he also said that if they're not able to pay it, let them be. Don't give hardship to people. That's not what Islam is about. Islam is about bringing lightness to the world, not darkness. So when these minority communities are attacked, I mean, they're so far beyond the essence of Prophet Muhammad's life and Islam in general.
Right. That's a great answer, Craig. And I see a very stark similarity between the points that are raised by extremists within Islam and the arguments that are presented by Islamophobes, be they the far right or the new atheist community. I mean, they're the same arguments that Islam promotes violent jihad, that Islam promotes subjugation of other peoples. So both of these extremes, on these side, I mean, they're both a fringe minority, but both of these extremes need education, and it's people like you. And what the Ahmadiyya Muslim community, for example, is doing is leading initiatives to educate the not only the American public, the Western public, but also these people in the Muslim world about what the true teachings of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, were, and countering Islamophobia and extremism in the same light. And you're well aware of the True Islam campaign as well. And that's one of the major educational and informational initiatives we've launched here in the United States. But it's sad that go ahead.
That's something. You got me thinking. I want to raise this point because I think it's important. So
the
term Islamophobia and Islamophobic, if we look at the dimensions of what that term means, so we have a few things. Islam, Islamophobes think Islam is a monolith. They think Islam is one thing. They think Islam is violent. They think the Islam in the West cannot coexist. They think there are a few things. And you said, Kashif, ISIS believes the same stuff.
Yeah.
So, theory, ISIS is Islamophobic because they have a fear and aversion of forms of Islam that they don't agree with.
That's right. Yeah.
You're totally right. It's two sides of the same coin.
That's right. It's two extremes of the same coin. That's right. I completely agree with that analogy. So, as I mentioned, the initiatives by the Ahmadiyya community, you also know that the Ahmadiyya Muslims themselves face bigotry from the extremist circles in countries such as Pakistan, Indonesia, Saudi Arabia. I'm sure you're well aware of the anti-Ahmadi laws in Pakistan as well. There's an apartheid that is in place there, and Ahmadis are not even allowed to identify as Muslims. I think I shared with you once that 3 of my uncles were jailed just for saying there's no God but Allah and Muhammad is a true messenger of Allah. And as we speak, there are hundreds languishing in jails as well. Now, what message would you, as someone who's studied Islam from an non-sectarian angle, from an unbiased angle, you've studied the life of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, what message do you give to such hate preachers, for example, in Pakistan?
Well, because we're live and in front of a large public audience, I have to be careful with what I say. I mean, I can't be totally mean to these mullahs, but I would say they need to open their minds and they need to open their hearts and they need to humble themselves before God, our creator, because what they're doing and trying to label people and saying, this is who you are, this is what we are, this is what this stands for, this is what that stands for. Nobody has the answer to these things except for God. So they need to humble themselves before God and realize that what they're effectively doing is trying to be God, trying to be this all-knowing, all-seeing being. So they need to humble themselves. And even, within the Islamic tradition, there's this saying, like, me, my religion, and to you, yours.
That's
and,
right.
Your relationship with God it's up to you. It's your personal, individual endeavor. And that's it. and there's no compulsion in religion. This is a famous Quranic passage. So this idea for these individuals to be saying these things, again, they've lost the big picture. They've forgotten that they're just a human being. And they haven't humbled themselves. They don't have the answers. And they shouldn't be concerned with judging others. I mean, Jesus is such a big prophet in the Islamic tradition.
That's right.
Basically, one of his main teachings, and one of the reasons why I love him, is because he's telling people, don't judge others. You know? There's a great story. I think Jesus was on the Temple Mount, and there was a prostitute on the ground surrounded by 5 or 6 rabbis, and the rabbis wanted to stone her because she was a prostitute. And Jesus went up to them and he said, you're all sinners. So the first sinner casts the first stone, or something like this.
Right.
It's trying to get this message across that no one is perfect. Everyone has a clean slate, and it's not right. It's immoral for people to inflict punishment and even violence upon people based on this idea that they have a certain truth. That's wrong.
That's right. And I think his exact words were, let he who is free of sin cast the first stone, right? I think that was it. Yeah, exactly. That's a phenomenal story. It's so inspiring. I mean, and I see you working with all kinds of peoples and all kinds of Muslims. Be they Sunni, Shia, Quranist, non-sectarian, or Ahmadi Muslims. And again, once in a while, when I see a post related to the Ahmadi Muslims, I see a few comments on your wall about people who kind of behave like the same kind of people you're criticizing, Donald Trump and others. And it's very surprising, when I see that. But the good thing is that they're a minority of people that you encounter.
The same story that we were talking about. You have these people saying, Ahmadis don't represent us.
Yeah.
Same people that are going out on Facebook when some individual Muslim guy goes up shooting a bunch of people. These are the same people saying this guy doesn't represent us. So
exactly.
It's closed-mindedness, and people need to open up their brains.
That's right.
To this idea of, multiple narratives, and that we have to make space for different types of knowledge, different types of truth. I think at the end of the day, religious traditions can meet on a common ground, and I think they do have certain strong roots in terms of truth. But when you have individuals saying, this is right and this is wrong, they're effectively the God game, and that's not good.
That's right. So, Craig, I'm going to read a couple more comments. This is a comment from Roya. And she's saying, I would like to thank Dr. Craig for supporting Muslims and his eye-opener messages to those who misunderstand Islam. Your work and speeches are brilliant. And as a Muslim, I really appreciate it.
That's great.
And there was another question. Let me just scroll through the messages. Sania Zafar is saying, Dr. Craig, do you have any plans to come and visit the UK Jalsa Salana? We would love to have you here.
I'm working on it next summer.
All right, there you go. We'll hold you to that. We'll play this weeks before the Jalsa Salana.
All right.
And then we had one more question. Let me scroll up and see. There was someone asking about what do you think is the role of the foreign intervention in the present, geopolitical crisis of ISIS and stuff like that?
Well, I don't think bombs and violence and guns solves anything. I think it's an issue of trying to win hearts and minds, and that's a very, very complicated issue, but it all starts locally. It's going to start within these communities, which is very, very difficult to do. I've never been to these communities, so it's hard for me to understand what the conditions are on the ground, but I don't think foreign intervention is the way forward. I don't think it's ever worked. You end one war and another one starts up. Even World War II, people like to say, World War II is an example of violence actually working. It didn't. I mean, it went right into the Cold War. It didn't solve anything. So we need a peaceful revolution. I think we need to train young minds to think differently, to be the next generation of leaders who are thinking about things like pluralism, who are thinking about things like dialogue and education and this idea of citizenship where, you know, your human rights are protected via a document through things like civil rights and civic rights rather than having to be part of a certain ethnicity or religion. I mean, that's all right. So it starts locally. That's very difficult to do, but bombs don't solve anything.
That's a great quote. Bombs don't solve anything. So, Craig, I first want to thank you so much for being a part of this. We're going, we're towards the end of the program. A lot of people on Rabwah Times page follow you personally as well on social media, and they would like to know your, upcoming work, your plans, anything, any projects you're working on. So, if you would just like to share what you're doing now or in the near future with the viewers here.
Sure. So. In terms of my teaching, I'm in the middle of the beginning of a semester here at Rice where I teach Muslims in America. And next semester, I teach sociology of religion. In terms of some of my bigger projects, I'll have a book coming out hopefully this time next year. The book is called Mamaphobia, Islam and Racism in the Pakistani Diaspora. And this is based on my PhD, where I interviewed young Pakistani men in Boston, my hometown, in Dublin, Ireland. And basically the term Mamaphobia is an aversion to Pakistanis. And that might sound really bad, but it's built off of Islamophobia. And this is what I mean by that term. Obviously, Pakistan and Pakistanis have been linked to this 9/11 narrative of being the other, the Muslim terrorist. And that creates obvious problems for people in Ireland and the United States. And at the same time, you have first generation and second generation Pakistanis in both of these settings who are averse to going back to Pakistan because of what's happening. So, fear aversion to Pakistan, even though within their own local communities, people have an aversion to them because they're Pakistani. So it's really interesting, right? So they don't go back to Pakistan because there's no religious freedom.
Right.
There's no tolerance. There's no dialogue. There's corruption. And then these are the same people who oppose what's happening in Pakistan. And they want to live in these societies in Dublin and Boston. And they want to be recognized and they want their voices to be heard. So they're kind of in this kind of limbo stage almost. So I have that coming out. I have another book going to be published by Noura Books, which is one of Indonesia's big booksellers. And this is going to be a culmination of a bunch of essays that I've written over the last 3 or 4 years, mainly on Prophet Muhammad, Islam, Christian-Muslim relations. So that should be out early 2017. And then,
oh, wow, that's great.
Yeah, and I hope to have that translated. So it's going to be in Indonesian, but my plan is to have it translated
into English?
English, Urdu, Arabic, and so on. And then, other than that, once I finish the draft of Mamaphobia, I'm going to move on to, I think the next big thing I want to write is an academic article on Islamophobia is racism and take that head on in a venue other than Huffington Post, where it's actually, the article will be severely criticized by top-notch scholars. And once I get that passed, then the idea is really there. So that's my plan. And then other than that, I got a bunch of speeches coming up. Tulsa. I'm going to an Emedi community in Croatia invited me. So,
oh, nice! Wow.
Yeah, there's just a bunch of speeches. All around. So,
all the best with all your work.
Thank you.
So that's a lot of work. You have a busy year ahead.
I do, yeah. But God willing, everything will go smoothly, and hopefully it can start chipping away at the inhumanity in the world.
That's right. Thank you so much for all you do, and all the best in your work. I think we have a few minutes, so I'm just going to scan and see if there's any other questions that came up. And see, there was a question on YouTube as well, because this is being streamed there as well, and it was about how you think Muslims and especially Pakistanis. I think this is in context of Khizr Khan, how they are impacting the U.S. election. So if you could briefly, if you want to talk on that briefly, and then we'll take one more question and we'll probably end the program.
Sure. So I think the greatest thing about Khizr Khan is that he was part of the undoing of Donald Trump's campaign, because he was doing great, and then Khizr Khan came out and made these statements which were fantastic, and then Donald Trump completely fumbled them. So I think it's really funny if we look back on the moments that really caught Donald Trump in a bad place. A Muslim is a Pakistani Muslim.
Exactly. Yeah. Quite the irony.
Yeah, it is. It's sweet justice, really.
Yeah.
It's God's intervention, I think. The Pakistani American community across the board, generally speaking, it's very well organized. They're always civically engaged. They're always participating in elections. You have lawyers, doctors, engineers, very, very successful people who are happy to be in America and proud to be American. And, I don't have any figures. I'm guessing most are voting for the Democratic Party. I don't see how many people could possibly vote for Donald Trump, but they might, because maybe of his tax plan or whatever. But I think across the board, Pakistani Americans are very, very engaged. Yeah. They're very enlightened, and they're doing excellent work, and they always have done excellent work ever since they started coming in the 60s.
Well, thank you so much. The one other question that I will take was about how Dr. Craig, how do you believe faith communities can come together to end Islamophobia in America?
Deuce, that term that I used at Jalsa. Yeah. Deuce is another, when you think two, you think of deuce is another word for two, and then if we put up two in a peace sign, then you have peace. But deuce it stands for dialogue, education, understanding, commitment, and engagement. And it all starts first within the individual. You have to be willing to change. You have to be willing to talk. From there, it all starts locally. You want to be educated, you go to your mosque or you go to your church and you start interacting with other people. Then you can come to a common ground. Then you can create an alliance, a partnership, a mutual understanding. And then you can go out there and hold different events, hold a public forum, hold a lecture at a library, hold a lecture at a mosque, contact your political figures. It all happens through dialogue and exposure, I think, is the big thing. But locally, it all starts first locally within yourself and then within your communities.
Thank you so much, Craig. Craig, many people are saying salam and they're saying thank you for being a part of this program. And, hopefully to the viewers, if you had any questions that I did not read, I'll go through the questions at the end of the program and I'll send them to Craig via email. But thank you so much for your questions. And Craig, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure that, we got to speak with you and hear your views about all these issues that are so relevant to what's happening in the contemporary world. So thank you once again. We wish you all the best in your future initiatives, projects, work, and hopefully, we'll bring you back on the program to discuss some other issues in the future. Thank you so much again.
Thank you, Kashif. It was a real pleasure. And please, if you can, tell everyone I said hello. And if they have any questions, they can contact me and email me. But it was a pleasure. I love doing this stuff. And please do have me back.
All right. Thank you so much.